Okey diyoruz. En son ne oldu? Kvot, Willem ve Sim Dena'ya büyü hakkında konuşmaya devam ettiler. Ve bu sefer işin böyle ince detaylar hakkında konuşma kısmına geldik. Kvot ortaya bir sürü farklı para koydu. Hepsiyle aynı anda binding yaptı falan. Bir yandan artistlik de yapıyor bayağı bir. Çünkü insanlar maksimum aynı anda iki binding yapılabildiğini düşünüyor. Ya böyle ortalama insanlar sim gibi diyoruz. Ya bir insan ortalama iki tane binding yapabiliyor. Maksimum zorlar üç yapıyor falan. Quad dört tane mi ne yaptı şu an ve en fazla beş tane yapabiliyorum dedi. Hani burada Quad'un ne kadar zeki olduğunu gösterme olayı da var ama bir yandan da Quad'un en fazla ne kadar binding yapabildiğini direkt Quad'un ağzından söyleterekten bize ileride de kullanabilirler bunu diyoruz. Şurada bir kenarda dursun. Geliyorum. Sonra Quote paraları havada tutmaya çalışırken Sim paralardan birini indirmeye çalıştı falan. En başta indiremedi, sonra indirebildi. Sonra Villa Sim beraber Quote'un havada tuttuğu paraları indirmeye çalıştılar. İşte birkaç tanesi indi ama bir tanesi inmedi falan. Orada böyle bir arar dövüşüne de şahit oldu Dana diyoruz. Aşağı yukarı öğrendi ama sonra Dana şeyi sordu, özellikle dedi ki yani ben şöyle bir büyü var onu öğrenmek istiyorum. Asıl dedi işte bir yerde bir yazı olacak. O yazının hangi dilde olduğunu bilmeye gerek yok. O kişi iş okey. Aklıma bir şey geldi ama onu yeri gelmeden konuşamayız. Şöyle geliyor. Neyse bir yerde yazı olacak ama yazının ne anlama geldiğini bilmeyecek o büyüye konu olacak kişi ama büyü geçerli olduğu için anlamını ne anlama geldiğini bilmediği yazıyı okusa bile o büyüyü edinmiş olacak falan böyle bir şey olabilir mi? Mümkün olabilir mi dedi. Dena bize dedik ki herhalde kendi başına geldi ondan sonra ya da birisine yapmak istiyor falan. Hani benim şu an aklıma felaket bir şey geldi ama onun yeri gelmeden konuşamayız diyoruz. Öyle. Umarım hatırlayacağım o yeri geldiği zaman ve bu konu hakkında konuşacağız. Neyse sonra bunlar muhabbeti bitirdiler gibi oldu. Dioç'un işte biseksüel diyoruz. Evet. Hem kadın hem erkekten hoşlananlar için. Dioç'un biseksüel olması üstüne konuştular. Will dedi ki gayet olabilir. Kvotun sesi çıkmadı ama tavrından gayet olabilir dediğini anladık. Dana zaten sesli bir şekilde konuşuyor olabilir tesi hakkında. Sim işte böyle bir şey niye olsun böyle bir şey olamaz modunda oldu. Dana da Sim'i bozdu diyoruz. Yani burada bir tık Dana'ya katıldım ama bir tık da durup durmadan biraz fazla üstüne gidilmiş gibi geldi. Sim'e karşı. Sonra Kvot da şey dedi ama işte Dana için Dana'ya Sim hakkında dedik uşağın üstüne gitme onun yaşadığı yerlerde bu tarz muhabbetler rahat yapılamıyor dedi. Sonra da bölüm bitti. Bunlar Dioç'un biseksüelliği hakkında konuşmadan önce de şey hakkında konuşmuşlardı. Dana Villes'ime demişti ki işte sizin için iki tane şeyim var verecek. Bir tanesi sır, kadınların bileceği konular hakkında. İkincisi de size güzel bir içki ısmarlayacağım demişti. Eğer bana büyü hakkında konuşursanız. O sır da şeymiş. İşte villesimin arkasında oturan masada iki kadın, bir erkeğin olduğu masadaki kadınlardan işte üstünde yeşil bok bir sürü kıyafet olan Sim'e düşmüş. Diğeri de Will'e düşmüş. Will arkasına hiç dönmeden bile biz zaten onların farkındayız. Dişi çok eğlenceliydi bence. Neyse ama işte onların yanında bir erkek var. Onların yanında bir erkek varken onları yürüyemiyoruz. Yaptı böyle. Yani dedi ki o erkek işte kırmızı kafalı erkeklerden hoşlanıyor. Cart curt deyip Kvott'tan hoşlandığına dair işaret etti diyoruz. Bunlar öyle olduğunu öğrenince yeşil ışık yandığını fark ettiler. İşte kendilerinin hatunları yürümeleri açısından diyoruz. Biz görmedik ama yürüdüklerini tahmin ediyoruz. Güzel bir içki de geliyor bunlara. O ikisine güzel bir ortam bırakılmışken Kvot Dena ile beraber takılmaya gitmişti. Dolaşıp muhabbet etmeye whatever diyoruz. Orada bıraktıydık. Okey, bir şey unutmadım bence diyecek. Okey. Chapter 19, Gentlemen and Thieves. It was late when Dana and I left the Julian, and the streets were empty. In the distance I heard fiddle music and the hollow clopping of a horse's hooves on cobblestones. So what rock have you been hiding under, she asked. The usual rock, I said, then a thought occurred to me. Did you come looking for me at the university, at the big square building that smells like coal smoke? Then I shook her head. I wouldn't begin to know where to find you there. It's like a maze. If I can't Catch you playing at anchors. I know I am out of luck. She looked at me curiously. Why? Someone showed up asking for me. I said with a dismissive gesture. She said, I told her a charm. I thought it might be you. I did come looking for you a while back, she said, but I never mentioned your abundant charm. The conversation lulled and silence swelled between us. Okay, Dios. I couldn't help but think of her walking arm in arm with Ambrose. I didn't want to know any more about it, but at the same time, it was the only thing in my head. I came to visit you at the Grey Man, I said, just to feel the air between us, but you'd already gone. She nodded. Karen and I had a bit of a falling out. Nothing too bad, I hope. I gestured to her throat. I noticed you still have the necklace. Then I touched the teardrop emerald absentmindedly. No, nothing terrible. You can say this for Kellen. He's a traditionalist. When he gives a gift, he sticks to it. He said the color flattered me, and I should keep the earrings too. She sighed. I'd feel better if he hadn't been so gracious. Still, they're nice to have. A safety net of sorts. They'll make my life easier if I don't hear from my patron soon. You're still hoping to hear from him, I asked, after what happened in Trebon, after he's been out of contact for more than a month with no word at all. Then I shrugged. That's just his way, I told you. He's a secretive sort. It's not odd for him to be gone for long stretches of time. I have a friend who's trying to find me a patron, I said. I could have him look for you too. She looked up at me, her eyes unreadable. It's sweet that you think I deserve better, but I really don't. I have a good voice, but that's it. I would hire a half-trained musician without even an instrument to her name. Anyone with ears to hear you, I said. Anyone with eyes to see. Then I looked down, her hair falling around her face like a curtain. You're sweet, she said quietly, making an odd fidgeting gesture with her hands. But ended up sorting things with Caitlin, I asked, steering the conversation somewhere safer. I spent too much time entertaining gentlemen callers, she said dryly. You should have explained to him that I'm nothing remotely resembling a gentleman, I said. That might have eased his mind. But I knew I couldn't have been a problem. I'd only managed to visit once. Had it been Ambrose that had come calling, I could picture him in the lavish sitting room all too easily, that damn head of his hanging casually off the corner of a chair as he drank chocolate and told jokes. Then his mouth quirked. It was mostly Geoffrey he objected to, she said. Apparently I was supposed to sit quiet and alone in my little box until he came to call on me. Who is Geoffrey? I asked to be polite. Has he managed to get a second thought into his head yet? I expected to get a laugh, but then I merely sighed. Cidden önemsiyor çünkü Diaz. He has, but none of them are particularly good thoughts. She shook her head. He came to Imre to make a name for himself with his poetry, but lost his shirt gambling. I heard that story before, I said. Happens all the time over at the university. That was just the beginning, she said. He figured he could win his money back, of course. First came the pawn shop. Then he borrowed money and lost it too. She made a conciliatory gesture. Though in all fairness, he didn't gamble that way. Some bitch rooked him, caught him with the weeping widow of all things. I looked at her, puzzled. The what? Then looked at me sideways and shocked. It's a simple rook, she said. A young woman stands outside a pawn shop, all flustered and teary. Then when some rich gent walks by, she explains how she came to the city to sell her wedding ring. She needs money for taxes or to repay a money lender. She waved her hands impatiently. The details don't matter. What matters is, when she got to town, she asked someone else to pawn the ring for her. Because she doesn't know a thing about regaining, of course. Then stopped walking in front of her pawn shop window, her face a mask of distress. I thought I could trust him, she said, but he just pawned it and ran off with the money. There's the ring right there. She pointed dramatically at the shop's window. But then I continued holding up a finger. Luckily, he sold the ring for a fraction of what it's worth. It's a family heirloom worth 40 talents, but the pawn shop is selling it for 4. Then stepped close and laid her hand on my chest, looking up at me with wide, imploring eyes. If you bought the ring, you could sell it for at least 20. I'd give you your 4 talents back right away. She stepped back and shrugged, that sort of thing. I'm Fron, how is it a rook? I catch on as soon as we go to the scissor. Then I roll her eyes. That's not how it works. We agree to meet tomorrow at noon. But by the time I get there, you already bought the ring yourself and ran off with it. I suddenly understood. And split the money with the owner of the pawn shop. She patted my shoulder. I knew you'd catch on sooner or later. It seemed fairly watertight except for one thing. Seems you'd need a special combination of trustworthy yet crooked pawn shop as a partner. True, she admitted, they're usually marked though. Then I pointed to the top of the nearby pawn shop's door frame. There were a series of marks that could easily be mistaken for random scratches in the paint. I hesitated for half a moment before adding, in Tarbian, markings like that meant this was a safe place to fence. I groped for an appropriate euphemism, questionably acquired goods. If then I was startled by my confession, she gave no sign of it. She merely shook her head and pointed more closely to the markings, moving her finger as she went. This says, reliable owner, open to simple rooks, even split. She glanced around at the rest of the doorframe and the shop's sign. Nothing about fencing goods from uncle. I never knew how to read them, I admitted. I glanced sideways at her, careful to keep any judgment out of my tone. And you know how this sort of thing works because I read it in a book, she said sarcastically. How do you think I know about it? She continued walking down the street. I joined her. I don't usually play it as a video, then I said, almost as an afterthought. I'm too young for that. For me, it's my mother's ring, or grandmother's, she shrugged. You change it to whatever feels right at the time. What if the gent is honest, I asked? What if he shows up at noon, willing to help? It doesn't happen often. She with a right twist to her mouth. She with a right twist to her mouth. Enteresan bir söylem bence bu ya da yanlış yazın emin değilim. Only once for me. Caught me completely by surprise. No, I set things up in advance with the owner just in case. I'm happy to rook some greedy bastard who tries to take advantage of a young girl, but I'm not about to take money off someone who's trying to help. Her expression went hard, unlike the bitch who got hold of Geoffrey. Showed up at noon, did he? Of course he did, she said. Just gave her the money. No need to pay me back, miss. You go say the family farm. Then I ran her hands through her hair, looking up at the sky. A farm? That doesn't even make any sense. Why would a farmer's wife have a diamond necklace? She glanced over at me. Why are the sweet ones such idiots with women? He's noble, I said. Can't he just ride home? He's never been on good terms with his family, she said. Less so now. His last letter didn't have any money, just the news that his mother was sick. Something in her voice caught my ear. How sick? I asked. Sick, then I didn't look up. Very sick. And of course, he's already sold his horse and can't afford passage on a ship. She sighed again. It's like watching one of those awful Tehlin dramas unfold. The path ill-chosen or something of the sort. Okay, anladım. Beşinci boyut diye bir dizi vardı. Benim de aklıma o geldi. If that's the case, all he has to do is stumble into a church at the end of the fourth act, I said. He'll pray, learn his lesson, and live the rest of his days a clean and virtuous boy. It will be different if he came to me for advice. She made a frustrated gesture, but no, he stops by afterward to tell me what he has done. The jilted moneylender cut off his credit, so what does he do? 7 kelime sonra da 10 kelimeye dönüşüyor. İkisi de var bence burada. Durum bu. My stomach twisted, he goes to a gale, I said, and he was happy when he told me. Then I looked at me, her expression despairing, like he'd finally figured a way out of this mess. She shivered. Let's go in here. She pointed to a small garden. There's more wind tonight than I thought. I set down my lute case and shrugged out of my cloak. Here I am fine. Then I looked like she was going to object for a moment, then drew it around herself. And you say you're not a gentleman, she chided. I am not, I said. I just know it will smell better after you worn it. And she said wisely, and then you will sell it to a perfumery and make your fortune. This been my plan all along, I admitted, a cunning and elaborate scheme. I'm more thief than a gentleman, you see. We sat down on a bench out of the wind. I think you lost a buckle, she said. I looked down at my lute case. The narrow end was gaping open, and the iron buckle was nowhere to be seen. I sighed and absentmindedly reached for one of the inner pockets of my cloak. Then I made a tiny noise, nothing loud, just a startled, indrawn breath as she looked suddenly up at me, her eyes wide and dark in the moonlight. I put my hand back as if burned by a fire, stammering an apology. Then I began to laugh quietly. Well, that's embarrassing, she said softly to herself. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I wasn't thinking. I got some wire in there that I can use to hold this closed for now. Oh, she said, of course. Her hands moved inside the cloak for a moment. Then she held out a piece of wire. I'm sorry, I said again. I was just startled, she said. I didn't think you were the sort to grab hold of a lady without some warning first. I looked down at the lute, embarrassed. I made my hands busy, running the wire through a hole the buckle had left and twisting it tightly shut. It's a lovely lute, then I said after a long, quiet moment, but that case is an absolute shambles. I tapped myself out buying the lute itself, I said. Then I looked up as if suddenly struck with an idea. I know. I'd ask Geoffrey to give me the name of his gaylet, and I can afford 2 cases. She sweated at me playfully, and I moved to sit next to her on the bench. Things were quiet for a moment, and then I looked down at her hands and repeated a fidgeting gesture she'd made several times during our talk. Okay diyoruz. Normalde sanki elleriyle böyle bir hareket yapmıyordu ama bu aralar çok yapıyor. Neden? Not sure. Only now did I realize what she was doing. Your ring, I asked. What happened to it? Then I gave me an odd look. You had a ring for as long as I known you, I explained. Silver with a pale blue stone. Her forehead furrowed. I know what it looked like. How did you? You wear it all the time, I said, trying to sound casual, as if I didn't know every detail of her. As if I didn't know her habit of twirling it on her finger when she was anxious or lost in thought. What happened to it? Then I looked down at her hands. A young gentleman has it, she said. I said then, because I couldn't help myself, I added, who? I doubt you. She paused, then looked up at me. Actually, you might know him. He goes to the university too. Ambrose Jacques, bu bölüm burada biter diyecektim, bitmiyormuş. Okay, şurada Quote'un Ambrose'u tanıyıp tanımamasından emin olmamasından, Quote'un şeytani rüzgarı Ambrose'a yaptığı hikayesinde Quote'un o büyü yaptığı kişinin Ambrose olduğu konusunu bilmemesinden, Dena'nın bunu Ambrose'un kendisinden duymadığını anlıyoruz. Bok gibi anlattım ama anlattım bence. My stomach was suddenly filled with acid and ice. Then I looked away. He has a rough charm about him, she explained. More rough than charm, really, but she trailed off into a shrug. I see, I said then. It must be fairly serious. They gave me a quizzical look, then realization spread onto her face, and she burst out laughing. She shook her head, waving her hands in violent negation. Oh no, God, no, nothing like that. He came calling a few times. We went to a play. He invited me out for dancing. He's remarkably light on his feet. She drew a deep breath and let it out in a sigh. The first night he was very genteel, witty even. The second night, slightly less so, her eyes narrowed. On the third night he got pushy. Things went sour after that. I had to leave my rooms at the bar's head because he kept showing up with trinkets and poems. A feeling of vast relief flooded me. For the first time in days, I felt like I was able to take a full lungful of air. I felt a smile threatening to burst out onto my face and fought it down, feeling it would be so wide and look like an absolute madman. Then I gave me a wry look. You'd be amazed at how similar arrogance and confidence look at first glance. And he was generous and rich, which is a nice combination. She held up her naked hand. The fitting was loose on my ring, and he said he'd have it repaired. I take it he wasn't nearly so generous after things went sour. Her red mouth made another wry smile, not nearly. I might be able to do something, I said, if the ring's important to you. It was important, then I said, giving me a frank look. But what would you do exactly? Remind him, one gentleman to another, that he should treat woman with dignity and respect. She rolled her eyes. Good luck. I simply gave her my most charming smile. I'd already told her the truth of things. I was no gentleman. I was a thief. Okay. Chapter 20, The Fickle Wind demiş. Kapadan önce diyecek bir şey var mı? Düşünüp geliyorum. Nope, hadi görüşürüz.